Lester is the number 4 corner in the class right now. Why are you feeling good about Florida State?
Well, we felt good for a long time about Leicester to Florida State. We've talked about it on the recruiting show here and several other of our great shows here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. But he was back at Florida State for Legacy Weekend, got a chance to hang out with the coaching staff again, rub some elbows with some of the great players that have played at Florida State. And he told our Noles 247 insider, Zach Blostein, that he was close to committing to Florida State during his visit. Again, we've liked Florida State's position here. The staff has done a great job recruiting him. He started to hit it off with Coach Surtain over there, and he likes the rise of Florida State's program, and he's been there several times. He's just very comfortable around Coach Norvell in that program. But look, there's a lot of competition for this tremendous prospect here. You have Alabama and Georgia, places that he's been several times as well, and still very much interested in. He's got a couple visits set up for Ohio State. So the Buckeyes are in the thick of it, and then the Florida Gators round out the top 5, and he's been there a few times and likes them as well. But I just think going into these next wave of visits, Florida State is the program that has set the bar in this recruitment, and so my crystal ball reflects that.
Steve, you mentioned Florida State's Legacy Weekend, and it's a big recruiting event for the Seminoles. Who else were they able to make some headway in the 24 class?
They had a lot of big-time prospects on campus for Legacy Weekend as they try and add to a recruiting class ranked number 4 nationally. Let's start with top 247 defensive lineman Kamarion Franklin. He's the number 1 player in the state of Mississippi, and the Seminoles are going hard in the state of Mississippi in 2024 and 2025. But Kamarion Franklin, he's been to Tallahassee a few times, has really clicked with the coaching staff, loves the atmosphere there, likes the defensive scheme. This is a young man that had 19 sacks as a junior. He can play across the defensive front, but is really excited about the fact that Florida State likes him as a defensive end. He said he hasn't set any favorites, but Florida State is definitely one of his top schools. Jason Zandamela is the top 247 offensive lineman, maybe the number 1 center in the country. I have a crystal ball for Florida State for him, and he was back on campus. Says Florida State always gives him a warm feeling in his heart. He has a good feeling about it. The culture, his relationship with the players. Florida State's excellently positioned for him, and I think Florida State's the one to beat for St. Thomas Aquinas, 4-star receiver James Madison II. He's been on campus a couple times. That's going to be a heck of a recruiting battle moving forward, but I like where the Seminoles stand with him. They really made an impression on 4-star linebacker Peyton Pierce from the Lone Star State. Some offensive linemen that really enjoyed it include Fletcher Westfall, Ty Hilton, and Kavian Broussard. And then they had a lot of 5-star guys in the 2025 class on campus. They're the one to beat for composite 5-star receiver Caleb Cunningham right now. They're well positioned for Elias Williams out of Georgia. Guys like Jaden Perlotti, DJ Pickett, and Ivan Taylor really enjoyed the experience. So Florida State Legacy Weekend is going to evolve into one of those like destination recruiting events year in and year out, like the Oklahoma Champ U Barbecue and Michigan's Barbecue at the Big House and Auburn's Big Cat Weekend.
Sounds like it. A lot of names. All right, you put in another crystal ball for Michigan to land 4-star linebacker Aaron Chiles. Now, he is one of their top defensive targets and the 14th ranked linebacker in the class. So what has you leaning Michigan here?
Well, there's been a lot of positive vibes around Michigan in this recruitment. Talked to him a little bit after his visit, said he had a great experience. Everyone's very welcoming. Obviously, he loves the trajectory of the program, the way Michigan develops players on that side of the football, the strength and conditioning program, his relationship with the coaching staff. And I think he just fits in at Michigan in general. Now, this is a recruitment that has some other contenders as well when you talk about schools like Clemson and Notre Dame, but I think Michigan has set the tone in this recruitment moving forward, going into what will be a big official visit season for him in June.
Steve, there's been question marks about Michigan's recruiting the quarterback position. Obviously, it was well documented that Dante Moore left the state. They missed on CJ Carr early in the cycle, but they now lead for Jaden Davis in the 24 class, and they just hosted Bryce Underwood in the 2025 class. What can you tell us about what stood out for Underwood when he was in Ann Arbor this past weekend?
Well, I think if you look at early on in Coach Harbaugh's era at Michigan and compare it to the last 4 cycles or so. I actually like the way that they've recruited the quarterback position. They're going to bring back J.J. McCarthy this year. He's one of the top signal callers in college football. Then to come into this cycle, they're the leader for Jaden Davis. He's going to be on campus this weekend, and I think the Wolverines are well positioned to ultimately land his signature. And then they're in on a lot of guys in the 2025 class. Let's talk Bryce Underwood specifically. He was on campus this past weekend, and that was one where they certainly were trailing by miles for until this weekend. He really got a chance to click and hit it off with new quarterbacks coach Kurt Campbell. I talked to Bryce Underwood's dad, and he said the chemistry was flowing between the two. They also really enjoyed getting with Michigan's strength and conditioning coach Ben Herbert and loved that presentation. They've been to games at the Big House. They know how passionate the fan base is. They know Jim Harbaugh's track record. And I think Michigan made a move here. But right now, I still like where LSU stands for Bryce Underwood. Now, this is still early in his recruitment. He's got a visit coming up to Ohio State on March 25th. He's trying to get to Texas and Texas A&M. He's been to Michigan State several times. He had a good visit to Penn State. USC is a program that I think you keep an eye in this one with what Lincoln Riley's done at the quarterback position. But good visit to Michigan, starting to build some good relationships with new quarterbacks coach Kurt Campbell. And we'll see where it takes them moving forward.
All right, let's head south. Clemson had a pretty big weekend welcoming in some talented recruits, specifically on the offensive line. The Tigers rank inside the top 10 in the 2024 rankings with 6 commits, but no offensive linemen yet. So how big a weekend was this for Dabo Swinney to add some big bodies up front?
Yeah, well, I think they made an impression on 2 of the best in the state of Texas at the position in Casey Poe and Michael Uini. Casey Poe and Michael Uini were both offered during their visits, had fantastic experiences, loved the culture. Casey Poe kind of mentioned that Clemson's like its little own slice of heaven there, tucked in there on campus there. But it was just 8 people on campus. They got to watch practice, listen to Coach Swinney talk. Casey Poe said that Clemson's definitely high on his list, and Michael Uini looking to get back for an official visit. He raved about his trip as well. They weren't even in his top 10 beforehand, but I think they're close to the top of his list right now. So, Clemson, when they get kids on campus, they move to the top of the list, and their track record of landing guys that visit is pretty strong. So we'll see how they fare with these offensive linemen moving forward.
Clemson had some big-time offensive linemen on campus. LSU had some big-time defensive linemen on campus. Williams and Nwaneri and David Stone both made it down to Baton Rouge. What's the latest, Steve, with LSU's pursuit of those 2 premier defensive linemen?
Yeah, so I think with David Stone, it was a real needle mover for him. Had some good dialogue with Coach Jamar Kane. Really enjoyed the atmosphere of that program, and so we'll see if he gets back. He's at Oklahoma this week and Michigan State this week. Those are the 2 programs that have been perceived as favorites. Texas A&M earlier in the month, he's been there several times. So LSU, they got to get him back to campus, and same goes with Williams Nwaneri, who was there with the 7-on-7 team, but he also got the tour of the facilities, talk a little bit with Coach Kane and company. He likes the way LSU's been recruiting. He's been to other places like Oklahoma and Missouri a ton. He's at Georgia this weekend, Texas A&M coming up. So, LSU, they're just, with visits like those, they're just trying to get in the mix and then get these young men to come back for a more intimate visit with more time around the staff and players. A couple defensive linemen that did visit that I like their position for. Charleston Collins was back. I have a 24/7 Sports crystal ball already in favor of LSU for him in that blue chip battle. TJ Lindsey's a defensive lineman from Arkansas who really loved his experience. I think LSU's moving up the list for him. So, they have the number 2 recruiting class in the country. They're in it for guys like Colin Simmons. So no shortage of blue chippers looking at LSU right now. But for Nwaneri and Stone specifically, I think they got to get those young men back to keep making a move.